Welcome, welcome, family, community, earthlings, star beings. We're so glad you're here celebrating the launch of this book that we have birthed, A Darker Wilderness, Black Nature Riding from Soil to Stars. What? It's in the world. We are so grateful and so honored that of all the things you could be doing right now, that you chose to celebrate this moment with us. And we plan to have a really fun, rich, and connected hour of diving into the magic, which is our relationship to this vast and singular planet. And before we begin, we want to fortify this space by the ancestors who are walking with us, who we couldn't have written this book without. And, one thing that Mama Nature teaches us is that energy never dies, right? It all goes back to the cycle. And so we want to call in our ancestors. And I just want to show this doll, this ancestral doll that has a face on both sides, really representing, the energies that are at our back. And at all times, walking with us, conspiring with us, celebrating with us. Shout out to my mother. I made this doll in a workshop with my mom, who's on the screen right now, and whose ancestors we share. And I want to invite you in this moment to think of who is an ancestor who had courage for you, who had foresight for you, who has loved you into existence, that you want to join us in this liberating conversation and to support us in being whole. And you can go ahead and call their name out loud. You can write their name in the chat, and we can lift up their presence. Share. Mojuba, respect and reverence. Thank you to your ancestors, to my ancestors, to all of our ancestors. May we continue to collaborate in our journey towards healing, towards wholeness. Keep them coming. So we're going to kick this off by just introducing ourselves, introducing who we are, who we've been, and I'll kick us off. So my name is Naima Penniman, and I'm the child of Reverend Adele Smith Penniman, who is a Haitian Black American spiritual leader and civil rights activist, and Keith Penniman, who is an environmental activist and librarian of European descent. And my dad and mom had the crazy idea when my sister was just 1 and I was just a baby to move to the middle of the woods in a tiny town in central Massachusetts, where we lived down a dirt road and lived in this trailer that you're seeing here. And me and my siblings, Alan and Leah, who shaped me continually, spent hours exploring the terrain around our home. So I really see myself as the cousin of ferns and moss and starlings, monarchs, cedar, all of creation. And I am madly in love with the earth and have really dedicated my life to our collective healing. A devotee of seeds, a disciple of mushrooms, a grower of medicine, and like so many of you, a real lifelong lover and defender of the earth. And so really devoted to all of her inhabitants, to all of our relations, to doing my small part. And here you can see some images of me and my siblings, like enjoying the natural world around us through all seasons. And, despite many challenges in our upbringing, Mother Nature was the force of consistency and, really was our babysitter. So she's my greatest teacher, my greatest partner and ally. I dream of a future where all beings, human and more than human, experience safety, dignity, and reciprocity. Ashe. And I will pass it on to Alexis. to introduce yourself.
Ashe. Thank you, Naima. I am Alexis Pauline Gumbs, child of Clyde Elliott Gumbs and Pauline Ann Mackenzie, and granddaughter of Joyce Mackenzie, lover of the water from forever ever, as you can see. And I'm grateful for the quality of flow and persistence that water is continuing to teach me, and in every form, frozen too. And I'm just so happy to be a part of this archivally held, ancestrally held ceremony of a book, and this beautiful gathering where we get to invite you into the portal.
Hi, everybody. I am Jay Wortham. I am the daughter of Joe and Janie, Emma and Earl, Lucinda and Caesar, and I am in the country right now. So I am joined by many dogs and roosters, which you can probably hear in the back. I am a tender of plant medicine, herbalist, sound healer, Reiki practitioner, energy worker, water baby, land baby from the jump. And I also am a writer and creator of books and recorder of audio, and just really, really, really delighted to be here with so many writers and thinkers and minds that I deeply, deeply admire, and for such a beautiful and worthy celebration. Thank you for letting me share.
I just want to shout out those two little teeth in the front, that last picture. I'm Erin Sharkey. I'm the daughter of Pat Lee Marcraft and Curtis Sharkey. And I grew up in the Midwest, and I grew up on what felt like a continual camping trip. We spent so much time exploring this country. I think before I was done with high school, I'd been to all the states. I'd slept on mountains and in valleys and next to rivers. And this is my younger brother, Thomas, who's part of my traveling crew. I also have a brother named Lucas, and lots of siblings on my dad's side. And yeah, just found nature as a place for reflection for me, a place to learn, a place to make lots of different kinds of friends. My mom always said that I had a new best friend at whatever camping site we ended up at. And I think, yeah, that's the way it should be. So I did spend one summer, I think we were at Yellowstone for 4 consecutive weeks. So I got every junior ranger badge possible from the Yellowstone Park. So yeah, that's one of my claims to fame. And I'm so honored that all of you joined us, and that I'm so honored to be with this panel of folks to talk about my baby that I share with them, this book that came into being just this week, publication date of Tuesday, Valentine's Day, a heart project for me. And yeah, we're so excited to share with you from the collection, and to continue the conversation that is in the mix of all those pages. So I'm gonna read a little bit from the introduction to the book. Before I start, I would like to say that this book was born from all the contributors, many places across their lives. But for me, the project started in 2 places. One is with the Givens collection of African American history at the University of Minnesota, which offered me a residency several years ago, and I got to explore without any responsibility or any expectation of a project, which was a very unique experience for me, and really felt like I could let the objects tell me about themselves and lead me to the next object and the next thing. And it really was an empowering experience for me. And I got to I looked over garden club roles, and I looked into government documents. I got to read narratives of people who were enslaved. It was an incredible experience, and that really inspired this in piece. And then I also would like to contribute the other parent to this project to be the community of writers here in Minnesota who are incarcerated. I've been a teacher with Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop for the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And I was honored to be able to teach a nature writing class at a correctional facility here in Minnesota, the state's biggest facility. And I really learned a lot from my students there, a lot from the opportunity to find nature in a place where natural things are tamped down. So this book is a celebration of the liberatory qualities of nature, and it's an insistence that everyone deserves access to nature. So I'll start from the introduction. It's hard to choose, so I'll just I'll start here. Maybe searching in such an archive, and that archive I refer to as the Gibbons collection, is about looking for oneself. An archive can serve as collective memory, though it is important to remember that the archive is not a full or neutral record. Each archive tells a story about the archivist as well as what is archived. The racist structures in place in the institution of memory can be discerned by the archive, as can the absence of Black archivists within those institutions. One feature of the archive of Black memory is that it must, by necessity, include many items connected to unknown or unidentified makers and subjects. This project claims and reacquaints the unknown by connecting those makers, and subjects to contemporary Black thinkers across time, and in turn, rewrites the record. The essays in this anthology reflect a range of experiences with nature, some green and budding, some rusting and tired. Some pieces are positive, some are negative, as varied as our various relationships with nature. The authors have reflected on the experience of living through the last half of the 20th century and the dawning of the 21st, while weaving those narratives with objects, some from family photo albums, some which date back many generations to the earliest days of this nation, from the statue erected in town square to ephemera like travel pamphlets. The items you'll find range from public and civic to private and personal. And then I'll read a piece that reflects my personal relationship with nature. And I'd like to shout out folks from Root Springs I know are in the group and listening in. As the world was shaped by the COVID-19 pandemic, and as police violence in Minneapolis led to unrest and derision, and while this collection was incubating, hatching, and finding its way to assembly, I was deepening my relationship with nature. In February 2021, 4 friends, my wife Zoe and I, embarked on an adventure and stepped up together to steward sacred land in central Minnesota. Root Springs is a farm and retreat center on 36 acres of prairie, wetlands, forest, and a small spring-fed lake. The land has been home to a spiritual community founded by a group of nuns from the Franciscan Sisters of Little Falls, who named the property Clare's Well. Later called Well Springs, the acreage was eventually cared for by a couple looking towards retirement and searching for new caretakers. We took up the baton, planning, organizing, fundraising, and forming a cooperative to practice new models of ownership beyond those prescribed by capitalism. We moved into the red farmhouse on a frigid weekend with temps south of 0, exactly 2 years ago this week, and started hosting guests right away. In the first year, we hosted more than 400 guests in 3 small hermitages, one near the lake, named for the civil rights activist Pauline Murray, one on the hill called Windrise, and a geodesic dome named for Octavia E. Butler. Our guests have described a feeling of being held once arriving on the land, that the instant they arrive on the property, a feeling washes over them of decompression, of relief, of release. The journey to the land might feel rife with possible threat. Think Trump memorabilia, Blue Lives Matter flags, anti-Trump Biden messages painted on the sides of barns, and signs staked in front yards along the 50-mile drive from the Twin Cities, but the land holds them once they're here. Minnesota is a place where people go up north to the houses and cabins that line the shorelines of all the lakes dotting the landscape across the state. These vacation homes are part of the privilege that is unevenly distributed among us. And I can't help but think of all the residual benefits that come from certain opportunities they offer to be immersed in nature. Our vision is to center Black, Indigenous, people of color, and lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and queer folks at Root Springs, and to offer a respite to hold grief and transition, renewal and cultivation, planning and visioning, recreation and celebration. I can feel its effects on me already. Curiosity has struck me. I'm fascinated by the teeming life we are in the midst of. We are feeling the ways the seasons wash over the land, the ways activity shifts from week to week, hour to hour, even after leaving the fern gully deep in the woods, where the light comes in golden and warm and dancing through translucent green leaves deep in the forest. I noticed a scattering of lantern-shaped, thin-skinned little buds that resemble the hops we grew on the urban farm in Buffalo. I learned that these small yellow windsocks were the catkins of an Ostrea virgineae, a American hopthorn beam, or an ironwood tree, as it is commonly known. On the prairie, another afternoon, the field was alive with dragonflies, dragonflies jetting and darting from tiny flowers of milkweed huddled together. A few weeks later, the buds are replaced with big seed pods bouncing in the breeze, some exploding with their cotton. Deer are curious about us, pausing to watch us from across the meadow. We wake to their tracks and to those of foxes and rabbits and wolves. One day, a couple of golden-headed mute swans landed on our little lake. The air was filled with the song of bullfrogs, screaming of guinea fowl. And this is just the beginning of our being acquainted. There is so much more to learn and observe and be shaped by. So I'll leave it there. And thank you all again for coming. And I will pass it on to you, Alexis.
Oh my gosh, so beautiful. That could just wash over me for days. Thank you, Erin. So grateful to be here with you all. My contribution to this ceremony in book form is also a ceremony, a water and stone ceremony, working with some artifacts from Audre Lorde's relationship with water. But I'm reading a short excerpt called The Blessing of Misrecognition. In 1986, Audre Lorde and her companion, the Black feminist scholar and activist Gloria Joseph, went on vacation to the island of Anguilla, my ancestral home. While she was there, Lorde enjoyed being mistaken for a local. It affirmed the Caribbean sense of self she craved as a daughter of Caribbean parents in exile. The healing impact of the sun and the sea on her during her time there is part of what convinced her to move permanently to the region, to St. Croix, with Joseph. While she was in Anguilla, she wrote a poem about Crocus Bay, as well as many journal musings about how the island felt like, quote, a piece of home. I have my grandmother's journal from her first visit to Anguilla, made after years of hearing vague references to the beauty of the island from my grandfather. The journal has a page for every day of the year, but all the pages are empty except for the single week of her trip. Anguilla is the center of my concept of home and my connection to the natural world. It's a small island, and everyone there is a close or distant cousin of mine. And since it was the site of our annual family gatherings, we went there almost every summer and several winters when I was a child. As a college student, I started visiting on all my breaks from school to listen to my grandparents talk about their lives and their roles in the Anguillan Revolution of 1967. When Audre Lorde and Gloria Joseph first visited Anguilla in February 1986, I was 4 years old. Joseph told me she had vague memories of meeting my grandfather, Jeremiah Gumbs, who would sit on his porch and hold court, although she was not sure if they had met during one of her trips with Audrey or before. Maybe Lord and my grandfather, who memorized every poem he loved, these two people who were both born on February 18th, got a chance to talk about poetry or about Crocus Hill, where Jeremiah was born, overlooking the bay that Lord wrote about. Maybe they celebrated the fact that it was right then the season of both of their birthdays. Or maybe not. I like the possibility, the blur there, though. Audre Lorde loved it in Anguilla and in Grenada and St. Croix, where people mistook her for some local relative. And I love allowing the places where Audre starts and I end to get mixed up. When I walk the beaches of Anguilla, a 16-mile-long, geologically unique island made from a coral reef that was born in the mouth of a volcano, I feel a kinship with my oldest relatives, with the cyanobacteria that helped oxygenate the earth, and with the small bones and shells of those ancestors who are now sand, with the heat at the core of the earth, with the deep breathing of the planet. When I sit quietly in Anguilla, place of Arawak ceremony, where archaeologists have found evidence not so much of settlement as of prayer, I hear my inner voice clearly. This is how I have learned to listen to myself. The "it feels right to me" discernment that Audre Lorde calls erotic power, which has been at the root of all my major decisions. I like imagining that while Lorde was being mistaken for one of my cousins, she was hearing the same voice I hear, encouraging her to trust her desire, to know that she could have what she wanted, to live the rest of her life in a place of sun, ocean, and what she called Caribbean Blackfulness. It wasn't until my second trip to Audre Lorde's maternal homeland of Carriacou that I thought to wonder if Lorde and I actually were cousins, not on the Anguillan paternal side of my lineage, but on the maternal Jamaican side. I visited Carriacou on a short day trip in 2008 when I was visiting Grenada for the first time for the Association of Caribbean Women Writers and Scholars Conference. As soon as I got off the plane in Grenada, I recognized the smell, not like Jamaica or Trinidad, where I had been stranded for a day on my way, not like most other islands I had been to, but yes, just like Anguilla. I wonder if it was in part the particular similarities in plant life and the smell they generated that caused Lorde to feel a similar resonance with home when she was in Anguilla. When I took the ferry to Carriacou, the sea grape trees, powder beaches, and rustic shoreline structures made me think of Anguilla even more. They made me want to come back. A decade later, in 2018, I had the opportunity to spend a full week in Carriacou as part of the Take My Word for Jewel retreat created by the Black feminist artists and healers Karma Mayette Johnson and Shelley Nicole. The retreat took place in a house owned by the Belmar family. Belmar is Audre Lorde's mother's maiden name. At the last minute, one of the retreat participants had to cancel, and her spot was offered to a local writer, Cindy Mackenzie. Mackenzie is my mother's maiden name. During one of the few and far between moments when my phone had a signal, my cousin Andre on my mother's side sent me 200 years of birth records of the Mackenzie family in Jamaica. Meanwhile, I was seeing the name Mackenzie on the gravestones in the cemetery on the way to the beach, and residents were telling me that there was a long history of Mackenzies on the island, but that most of them had migrated. It seemed as if a web was tightening. Finally, likely exasperated with my questions, Ms. Clemencia Alexander, the woman who runs the museum at the Carriacou Historical Society, took me by the hand. She and her little nephew walked me down the street to the gate of the house where the Mackenzies lived. No one was home. On a small island, everyone is presumed to be cousins in some way. Or as my elder cousin Hudson, also exasperated with my questions, said, all Anguilla people is the same people. On Carriacou, several unexpected signs seem to point to the possibilities that I have a deeper connection to the island than I suspected. But my connection to Audre Lorde does not need to be one of lineage or ancestry. It could just be the grace, the blur of possibility and calling, and the openings, like the mouths of coral, wrought by letting the water move us and by building upon the breathing of our dead. Thank you all for listening and passing it to dear sister Naima.
Alexis, thank you so much for channeling and reading that beautiful piece to us. And y'all get ready to read the whole thing. It's more. So my contribution to this ceremony in book form is called Concentric Memory, Remembering Our Way into the Future. And there are 3 concentric storylines interwoven into my piece. And the first is very personal around the ways that being raised in deep kinship with the natural world instilled a ferocious love for the earth in my siblings and I, and with it, this lifelong devotion to defend and collaborate with nature. From the Junior Ecologist Kids Club when I was 7 years old, up until Wild Seed and Soul Fire Farm present day. And then the second concentric ring is really around how forests have been so meaningful and far-reaching to our people's resistance and survival across space and time, right? As a place of spiritual power and physical protection, it's been vital for the liberation of my grandfather's ancestors in Haiti, as well as my grandmother's ancestors in the American South. We know that the cover of the woods was essential for the Underground Railroad, as were the natural medicines that Harriet Tubman and others on the Underground Railroad harvested from the wild to quiet the babies and heal the wounds along those journeys to freedom. And plants were also really key to defeating the enslavers in Haiti. They used plant poison and fire, and then forests became the sites for autonomous communities that were forged in resistance to the slave system that operated for centuries. And we see maroon communities all over the so-called New World. So that is a deep exploration of my essay as well. And then the third concentric circle is really around the future that we're called to create. And at this crossroads, y'all, of so much peril and so much promise, the natural world is our beacon, right? She is our compass. The ecosystems around us offer so many templates for how we share resources, right? How we pollinate. The forest is giving us archetypes of interdependence, frameworks for evolution. And so what I want to share with you now is really fast forwarding to the moral of the story. And that is the lessons that Mama Nature has taught me. These are prerequisites for our collective preservation. And I pray that we apply them on the path ahead. Mama Nature told me, I am part of you. You are part of me. When we forgot, she remembered us. When we were lost, she found us. Mama Nature taught me, we are stronger together. She showed me the interspecies marriage of algae and fungi who fell in love across kingdoms, birthed a new life form, capable of making home on stone, adept at staying alive in the harshest conditions. Could we be like that? Join forces across difference, weave our powers, individual but undividable. In the midst of unthinkable circumstances, learn how to flourish together. Mama Nature taught me, Blackness is precious. It must be respected. It must be protected from artificial light. It must be tended. She showed me the indigo night, the miracle of starlight, the deep, dark ocean, the rich Black soils brimming with life. Mama Nature taught me, nothing and no one is disposable. It all goes back to the cycle. She showed me there is no such thing as a way. Not for our waste heaped high in landfills or amassing in the Pacific, not for our people deemed throwaway, warehoused in cages and open air prisons. There is no escaping the totality of this single beating earth, the inseparable web of our perpetual relations. There is no mistaking, all of us belong. Mama Nature told me, you are made of the same matter as stardust. Remember your connection to everything. She showed me the animate force of existence pulsing all around us, doing everything in its power to regenerate life, even in death. She showed me a hollowed out tree, still standing, long dead, a hatchery for starlings, a porcupine den, a perch for owls, a hideout for bats, a food cache for chipmunks, a nuthatch's nest. Could we feel our ancestors' love like that? Tangible and present all around us, sheltering and nourishing us, supporting our flourishing. Could we be eternal? Mama Nature taught me, transformation is inevitable, adaptation is essential, change creates openings. She showed me how dolphins evolved dorsal fins to withstand the wild movement of the ocean, how plants befriended fungi who helped them migrate out of water, who taught them how to grow roots, who showed them how to survive on scorched land, to do what had never been done before, until together they transformed the atmosphere, built soil over stone, and patiently and unmistakably changed the entire world. Could we be like that? Work together to do the unthinkable and shift the course of destiny. Mama Nature asked me, what will be your contribution? How will you partner with renewal to usher evolution? What are you willing to let go of? How are you willing to grow? Will you remember you are intrinsic to something bigger? What will you give rise to with the life force you've been given? Mama Nature asked me, can you hear me? And are you listening? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was gorgeous. You can always bring it. I'm not sure what happened to Jay. So I guess we get into this conversation with each other. Does that feel all right to y'all? Awesome. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about how you came at like the writing process, how you came to your subject, how you incorporated the archival object.
Well, I can start. The archival object that shows up in the book is this image of Audre Lorde in an inflatable boat in a lake, and she's in this lake. It's Krummlank in Germany, and that in itself is really deep to me. I'm going to try to show it to y'all, because that lake had been like where a Nazi housing development was. So she's chilling, sunglasses, eating fruit, just like being happy. And this was like one of her favorite things to do when she was in Berlin for her cancer treatment, was to go out on this lake, and there was like a nude beach on one side. It was just really perfect for Audre Lorde, but it was also resetting and reclaiming this place that had the exact opposite belief as the belief that grounds this book, which is that everyone deserves access to the love and beauty of nature. And so Audre was just in there like reveling in it. And it's actually one of the places that she had her ashes offered. So she wanted to be part of that energy and is part of that energy forever. And I just was like, what there's a whole series of pictures, and they're not all included in the book, that are her just in an inflatable boat in this same lake. And I was like, okay, my writing practice was kind of to try to time travel there and be with her and think about what the ceremonies were that I needed to be there. So that was my way in to the water and stone ceremony that I got to offer to this book.
I was so sad to not be able to include all of the images of Audrey in a boat, and all the images of your rocks too. I think the hope that I have is that the collection invites people to go explore for themselves and go find more objects, more things to interact with. Welcome back, Jay. Happy to have you. Do you want to talk about your object, Naima, or should we pitch it back to Jay?
Whatever you think, editor. We could finish this question and then hear from Jay, maybe?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay. So the archival object I chose was this beautiful statue that's in Haiti. And it is a bronze representation of Macandal, who was a herbalist, an orator, a linguist, a spiritual person who was born on the continent, lived as a free person before being enslaved in Haiti, and was able to escape this really sadistic form of slavery and go on to both build Maroon community in Haiti and like plot an uprising that involved thousands and thousands of enslaved folks in plantations on Haiti, across Haiti, through a lot of collaboration with spiritual forces and nature, fire, plant poisons, and spirit. And I chose the object in part because of that pact with the divine and that partnership with nature that I feel Macandal represents. And also because of this really powerful symbol of the conch shell, which was a tool for communication, of really signaling both ceremony and insurrection, letting folks know it was time to rise up, it's time to run. And it's also that it's time to gather in prayer. The Haitian Revolution was started through a ritual. And that resonates so much with the liberation work that I'm committed to in my lifetime, and I connect it a lot to my own story as well, including the very first time that I got to travel back to my ancestral homeland of Haiti in 2010. I was carrying with me prayers that had been written by comrades in Brooklyn, New York City, and Detroit for survivors of that devastating earthquake that happened in 2010. And I went first thing to the ocean, like to offer these prayers, to speak those prayers to the water, knowing that water has the power to transmit and carry messages, and the water surrounds the entire island. So I spoke all those prayers out loud for the survival and rising of our Haitian community. And when I concluded and was saying ashe, 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 this beautiful conch shell washed up from the shore, like right between my feet. And I was like, whoa, and I picked it up. And this has been the piece that I pray with continuously. It's like sat on my altar ever since. I carry it with me. It's what I use to signal it is time. It is what I do to like make my daily commitments for, how I want to continue to collaborate with nature and with spirit for our liberation.
That's so gorgeous. I'll just quickly share the object that my essay is interacting with is this Farmer's Almanac that was written by Benjamin Banneker in 1795. And Benjamin Banneker is a hero of mine and somebody I think doesn't get enough accolades, flowers. So I encourage you to get to know Benjamin Banneker. And in my essay, I'm reflecting on the 10 years that I lived in Buffalo, New York. Shout out Buffalo family. I see some of you in the group, living and working on an urban farm and hanging out with teenagers and thinking about food. And in a place that had been in many ways abandoned by lots of folks, but really thinking about reclamation, about revisioning empty spaces as opportunities for our care, and for just getting curious about growing things and being with living things there. So yeah, and the essay uses the Best Days calendar, which is one of my favorite parts of Farmers' Almanacs, a calendar that really uses observation and weather patterns and astronomical phenomena to give you some guidance on the best days to do a lot of things, to cut your hair, to shear your sheep, to harvest fruit trees. And so I started by imagining how a best days calendar would work and look in a neighborhood, in an urban place. And so that's the structure that holds the essay together, is pieces of what is natural and natural and happens naturally in an urban place, as an emphasis that nature is everywhere and nature is also in the city and in our neighborhoods. Sweet. Thanks, y'all.
What a beautiful recollection. I'm so happy that I got to hear so much of that. And I'm so glad to be here tonight, just celebrating so much wisdom and brilliance and just uplifting in these pages. It is not an exaggeration to say that I got really overwhelmed with emotion, may have shed some tears. The Scorpio was just like swimming in these deep emotional waters. And I just, for everyone who hasn't picked up this book yet, it is essential reading. I wanted to ask a little bit about everyone's relationship to the idea of nature, and if you always saw yourself in relationship to nature. I know that we're all, everyone's sort of sharing these childhood recollections. We looked at our images of ourselves as children in nature, but I think so much of this anthology is trying to get at this idea of remaking language and terms like wilderness, terms like outdoors, and situating the ways those words have been situated in like a great American project that hasn't always included us. And yet this book is all about the ways in which we have different experiences of the natural world. And I'm so curious to hear about just coming to that and coming to see yourself. Alexis, your essay is about this so much, but coming to see yourself as someone who is a nature writer and thinker and advocate. Anyone?
I'd be happy to start. I have spent a lot of time in nature, as I said in my introduction. We spent a lot of time camping out in the elements, but I wouldn't say that I felt like really natural until very recently, actually. And even when I lived on the farm, I joked that I killed things, like that I'm not very good at growing plants. I'm working on it, but it's not my strong suit. I'm really good at watering. I'm good at harvesting. I'm really good at giving a farm tour, but I'm not like your go-to in tending things. So I'm getting more and more confident in that space. And I think that it's rooted for me in being an asthmatic as a child, and that like there is this, I had sort of like a tension relationship with nature. I was allergic to everything, and like physical activity often made me stand out from a group. There was, lots of reasons that being a chronically ill person and then a fat person made nature, especially the way that nature is really delivered to us, that nature is something you have to conquer, that you have to like be able to climb a mountain and plant a flag there. And that's how nature is meant to be interacted with, as opposed to like thinking about all the ways that it cares for us and provides for us, and that we are ourselves natural. So that's something that has definitely, I'm coming to it for sure.
Yeah, to add to that, I think that I grew up with some amazing experiences of getting to be in relationship, especially with the ocean. But I remember being actually terrified of like the salt being in my eyes and the intensity of what that encounter and think the realization of like that the boundaries of who I am are not really the boundaries. There's like an existential crisis that I was having at a young age around that. And, you know, it's amazing because there's an intentionality. I mean, I see it in you in particular, Naima. I remember once we were at the Blue Mountain Center and you just had these, I mean, this is who you are, but I was like, what? You were like, I slept out in a hammock under the stars and like the most beautiful rain was falling upon me. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, like, I was like, if I experienced that same thing, I think I would have described it as like a crisis, like that I got rained on in the hammock or whatever. And it was the most beautiful thing, you know, to witness you in your communion with anything that might happen outside. And that really has been just you being you, a form of mentorship and a guide for what does it mean? It's a surrender. For me, it's a surrender to say like, oh, I'm actually part of anything that's happening in nature. It's not something I have to protect myself from to preserve my idea of safety or individuality. And so I feel like literally since I met you, I've been in a process of unlearning that and receiving that and remembering, you know, that this entire situation of us being Earth and Earth being Earth is so supportive and is the only possible condition of this existence that that I have, you know, for all the bacteria and all the cells that are right here just to be able to be. And so I want to honor that because I feel like my relationship to being in nature has transformed, and there have been multiple transformers, but you, Naima, have been a major, major one.
That's such an honor, and I'm so glad you are remembering that, and that's returning to you. I absolutely recognize what a unique circumstance led me to be the very wild creature that I am, in terms of really feeling sense of protection and safety in nature, as opposed to nature being something I need to protect myself from. And I recognize the many circumstances that have been set up that, you know, make us fear and feel separate from nature, particularly as Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And, you know, one of the lines in my piece is that, you know, the years mom couldn't be around, I think she assigned the best babysitter in her place, and that was Mama Nature herself. And I really feel that I saw the natural world around me as a guardian, as a parental figure, as a source of safety and belonging in a context in which there was a lot of lack of safety, where there was a lot of threat, where there was a lot of, you know, absence of key nurturance that I needed as a young person. So there's a way that my kind of personification and kinship with the natural world really comes from the set of circumstances, being a young person, often alone, you know, with my siblings in wild spaces. Like, all right, it's us in the trees, it's us in the lake. Like, we're gonna figure out how to support each other and take care of each other. And I really felt this contrast from like the home safety of our out backwoods little camp. It was like, I mean, it was our home, but I remember when our house burned down, like on the front page of the paper, it was like, you know, this camp in the backwoods, like burned to the ground. You know, it was very, you know, very down back in the deep woods. All that to say, like at my school growing up, you know, kids would sneer at our handmade and hand-me-down clothes, scorn our untamable hair, you know, say brownies weren't allowed in this school. And I saw my reflection in the natural world. I was like, well, nature is brown. I see all my tones here around me. Nature is queer. We know that, you know, and even if I didn't know that as a child, it's like, you know, the gaydar is alive. It's like, yeah, nature is queer and abundant and wild and untamable, just like me. And I really felt this sense of like, yeah, relationship not having an abundance of toys, but really having access to the jungle gyms of trees and the front row seats to the stars at night and the tributaries that, you know, really felt like a source of wonder for me. And so yeah, in my case, I do really feel like this sense of there's no separation. And if anything, you know, having lived in cities for a lot of my life, it's like I have to like tame that part of me that wants to like climb up the trees on the sidewalk and, you know, dance in the rain. And not that I'm trying to tame it, but I do feel really grateful for that. And this point in my life where I feel like we're in a great returning of that type of kinship and belonging that is our birthright and is in all of us.
Beautiful. I did want to ask one more question, just being mindful of the time, but this idea comes up in everyone's essays, actually, and Naima maybe a bit more directly, but there is this incredible idea about the ways in which our practices can reorder the world. Like, this is a time to remake the world. This is a time to, you know, think about destruction as not necessarily devastation, but opportunities for renewal and looking towards nature for the ways in which that happens. And I was so interested to hear more about that from you, and then also from everyone, in terms of what are the stewardship and ancestral practices that are helping to reorder your most immediate world, which then of course radiates out in a much bigger way.
I could go quickly first. I feel like for me, it's really about investment at Root Springs. I feel like I'm learning so many things about the importance, the essential component of rest and respite in organizing work. I've been an organizer since I was a teenager, and it's something that is often neglected. And I think rest in nature has a restoring quality like little else. So for me, I think thinking about the ways that we are recovering from toxic community organizing stuff, I think for me is the thing.
I'm just still reflecting. I don't know if you want to say something next, Naima.
Sure, thank you. I think a lot of the practices that feel so alive and important to revive from our lineages is around reciprocity with the earth, and, you know, not seeing the earth as something like a resource that we're separate from, but rather a relative that we're in relationship with. And as with any relationship, there needs to be a mutuality. There needs to be a reciprocity of give and take. And so, you know, how are we, through our practices, you know, making offerings, asking permission? How are we really listening for an answer as opposed to imposing what we want the outcome to be? And it's this like ecological humility that I think is so important if we're gonna, you know, get beyond a culture that has been so ravenous and so extractive and insatiable, to one where we can really live in balance and all beings can thrive. So that's a huge one. And certainly in the land stewardship work I've been engaged in, both at Soul Fire Farm and Wild Seed, there's a lot of like really, you know, practical techniques of like, yeah, how do we heal the soil, and how do we really like pay attention to the waterways to know how best to irrigate that aligns with the patterns of the ecosystem, and how do we like harvest indigenous microorganisms and fungi from the forest to help to grow life-giving food, and like, you know, climate resilient practices to resist drought. There's also those very kind of tangible pieces that I think are already in our lineages and in our ancestral memories and histories that we need to be reviving, as well as the spiritual practices that are about how we show up in relationship with our more than human kin.
Yeah, all of that makes so much sense. I think for me, it's all the same unlearning of the lie of separation and showing up and being present, and the form of presence that, being on the land, wondering about the sky, like paying attention in a sensory way to this world that we're a part of and where we're situated in the universe is healing me from an impulse of disassociation. And it is grounding in every way, literally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all of it. And it's very true, that the honor of getting to be part of Tierra Negra Farm on the Earthseed Collective land is to remember, like, what is food? Like, what is it actually? And what does it mean to be in a long-term relationship with what supports us, which is the whole thing. We are in a long-term relationship with an ecosystem that we're part of. And I see such parallels for myself between the fact of living in capitalism, which depends on the idea that actually there's no long-term relationships and all things are disposable, and this fantasy of separateness and isolation that has been a survivor coping mechanism, to be like, I'm not actually even here, or actually, nothing actually that's going on here impacts me, right? And everything that's going on here impacts us, right? And I really agree, with what you were saying earlier, Naima. It's like, yes, Mother Nature is showing us how to heal that and to accept the reality that we're connected with everything, and to feel grounded, nurtured, and powerful enough that that's the good news, and that's not something to escape from, because, as you said, there like literally is no escape. There's nowhere else. We can't escape ourselves. This is who we are.
Um, 7 o'clock in Minnesota, 8 o'clock where you are, came so fast, like kind of surprisingly fast. Time, that slippery thing it is. So thanks again. And I know there will be many more ways for us to be interacting and talking and growing the seed that's being planted in this collection. I like the idea of a part 2. That's a great idea. I would like to encourage people to get the book, buy it for yourself, buy it for other people, share it with people, put it into a library that you love. Send some books to folks who are incarcerated in your state, in the carceral system. You can get books from milkweed.org. Yay, cuties. Or you can ask for it at your independent local bookstore. And yeah, here's to more and more conversation. Do you want to say any final words to other folks?
I'm just so happy to have been able to be here and to see the sacred items and beautiful ancestors, Naima. And I'll just say that I'm just inviting, I give homework, right? Because I'm like, I'm a teacher all the time. And I want to just invite folks in terms of reflection. Naima offered these beautiful questions from Mother Earth. And so I think that there's this core question, if you want to journal about this, like, what is Mama Nature teaching you right now at this time in your life? What is she teaching you? And those great questions of what are you willing to let go of? How are you willing to grow? Are, I think, a very good guide for that. So I would say that if you can right now, or when you wake up tomorrow, that can be a prompt for you to reflect on from this sharing. And then just again, gratitude for everyone who showed up, gratitude that I get to be part of this miracle, gratitude for the invitation. Erin Sharkey, I love you. Mwah!
Erin, love, you're on mute if you want to be heard.
No, I was just telling myself that you might have something to say. That's all.
Just echoing the gratitude to sharing this space and affirming that we all are of the earth, we all belong to the earth, and that we are connected across space and time. And I have faith that if we come back into remembrance of that connection, of that interdependence, like all that we need is here, all we need is around us and within us. And I really do hope that, once that connection is there, we can step forward into a livable future for all of us. May it be so.
Thanks, y'all. Have a really, really good rest of your evening. Blessings and sweetness, more than you can take. Good night. Good night.